Ethan Caldwell had built an empire before most men learned patience. At 32 he owned skyscrapers, tech patents, and headlines that never let the world forget he was rich, brilliant, and dangerously charming. Women admired him. Investors trusted him. The city practically bent in his direction. But power has a strange way of inviting chaos. After one too many scandals tied to his reckless dating life, his board began whispering. His mother, Evelyn Caldwell, didn't whisper. She acted. Within a week, a new live-in maid was hired to restore order to the mansion, and perhaps to Ethan himself. Maya Brooks arrived without ceremony. She wore simple jeans, clean sneakers, and her short hair framed a face untouched by glamour. No nervous giggles. No widened eyes at marble floors or crystal chandeliers. She surveyed the mansion like a mechanic inspecting an engine. Their first encounter happened near the grand staircase. Ethan descended in a tailored suit, expecting the usual reaction, a startled glance, maybe admiration. Instead, Maya looked down at the polished floor and said calmly, "You might want to wipe your shoes. Mud stains." No hesitation. No apology. Ethan paused, surprised. He tried a lazy smile, the kind that usually softened resistance. "Do you always greet your employer with criticism?" She met his gaze evenly. "I greet messes with solutions." Something flickered in his expression. Annoyance, yes, but also intrigue. For the first time in years, a woman wasn't impressed. Maya moved past him with quiet confidence, already reorganizing staff schedules and restoring order to rooms he barely noticed. Ethan watched her from the balcony later that evening, unsettled. She didn't bow. She didn't flirt. She didn't chase. And somehow, that unsettled him more than any rejection ever had. By the third morning, Ethan realized something unsettling. His mansion no longer moved at his command. It moved at Maya Brooks'. The staff schedules had been reorganized. The kitchen inventory was labeled. Even his private office, once a carefully curated chaos only he understood, had been rearranged with ruthless efficiency. Ethan stood in the doorway of his office, staring at the neatly stacked files. "Who touched my desk?" Maya didn't look up from her clipboard. "I did." "You had no permission." "You hired me to maintain the house," she replied calmly. "That includes the parts you pretend not to live in." No apology. No fear. Ethan folded his arms. He was used to control. Boardrooms fell silent when he entered. Yet here he was, arguing with someone who earned a fraction of what he spent on a watch. "You're bold," he said. "I'm efficient," she corrected. The tension between them became routine. He'd leave gym equipment scattered across the terrace. She'd return it without a word. He'd test her with casual flirtation, leaning too close, lowering his voice just slightly. She remained unmoved. "You practiced that smile in the mirror?" she once asked dryly. He almost laughed. One evening, a thunderstorm rolled across the city. The lights flickered, then went out entirely. Staff members panicked. Ethan reached for his phone, irritated. Maya was already moving. Within minutes, backup generators hummed to life. Candles were placed strategically. Instructions were given calmly, confidently. She didn't ask him what to do. She simply handled it. Standing in the softened glow of candlelight, Ethan watched her silhouette move through the hallways with quiet authority. For the first time, he wasn't the most commanding presence in his own home. And instead of resenting it, he found himself wanting to understand her. Not as his employee, but as a challenge. Ethan had always believed people revealed themselves when they thought no one was watching. Late one evening, long after the staff had retired, he walked past the east corridor and heard a voice drifting from the open balcony doors. Maya's voice. It was softer than he had ever heard it. "I know exams are hard, Danny," she said gently into her phone. "But you've worked too hard to doubt yourself now. Just focus. I've got everything handled here." Ethan paused without meaning to. There was no sarcasm in her tone. No sharp edges. Only warmth. She laughed quietly at something her younger brother said, and for a moment, the tomboy maid who challenged him daily sounded simply human. When she ended the call and turned around, she nearly collided with him. "How long have you been standing there?" she asked, guarded again. "Long enough," he admitted. She crossed her arms. "Eavesdropping doesn't suit billionaires." "Neither does being ignored," he replied. For once, there was no argument. The next afternoon, a glass pitcher slipped from a high shelf while Maya was reorganizing the kitchen. It shattered at her feet. She inhaled sharply as a small shard nicked her palm. Ethan had been nearby. He reached her before she could brush it off. "Stop moving," he ordered instinctively, taking her wrist. His touch was firm but careful as he examined the cut. It wasn't serious, but the contact lingered longer than necessary. Their eyes met. No teasing. No challenge. Just awareness. Maya gently pulled her hand back. "I can handle it." "I know," he said quietly. And that was the difference. For the first time, Ethan Caldwell wasn't trying to win. He was trying to understand. And beneath Maya's fearless exterior, he had glimpsed something far more powerful than defiance: devotion. Clara Whitmore never entered a room quietly. When she stepped back into Ethan Caldwell's mansion, it was as if she had never left. Elegant heels against marble, designer perfume trailing behind her like a statement. She had once been the perfect accessory to his lifestyle. Beautiful, poised, admired. Maya noticed her immediately. Clara's eyes swept across the foyer and settled on Maya with faint amusement. "You've redecorated," she said lightly, glancing at Ethan. "Including the staff." Ethan gave a measured smile. "Maya keeps the house running." "How impressive," Clara replied, her tone suggesting otherwise. Maya simply nodded and continued adjusting a floral arrangement. She had no interest in competing in a room that smelled of old pride. Over dinner, Clara laughed a little too brightly at Ethan's comments. She reached for his arm as though reclaiming territory. Ethan noticed something unexpected stirring in his chest. Not attraction, not nostalgia. Irritation. When Clara remarked, "It must be exhausting pretending to fit into this world," her gaze flicked toward Maya. The air shifted. Ethan's voice cooled. "Maya doesn't pretend. That's more than I can say for most people in this city." Clara blinked, surprised. Maya looked up slowly, caught off guard. It wasn't dramatic. He hadn't raised his voice. But he had chosen a side, publicly. Later that evening, Clara confronted him privately. "Since when do you defend employees? Since when do you insult them?" he shot back. From the hallway, Maya overheard enough to understand one thing. He had been angry on her behalf. The realization unsettled her more than Clara's arrogance ever could. Because jealousy wasn't something she expected from Ethan Caldwell. And care? That was something far more dangerous. The annual Caldwell Foundation Gala was approaching, an event that demanded perfection, cameras, and a carefully chosen woman at Ethan's side. 3 days before the event, his scheduled date canceled. Mrs. Evelyn Caldwell wasted no time suggesting a replacement. "Clara would be appropriate," she said firmly. "The press already knows her." Ethan glanced across the dining room where Maya was reviewing event logistics with the catering team. Calm, focused, uninterested in the conversation about his social life. "No," he replied simply. The word surprised even him. That evening he found Maya in the library finalizing staff assignments. "I need you at the gala," he said. She didn't look up. "You need someone to polish glasses." "I need someone who won't pretend." That made her pause. "As my assistant," he clarified. "Professional. Nothing more." Maya studied him carefully. "I'm not wearing anything uncomfortable." A faint smile tugged at his lips. "Wouldn't dream of it." The night of the gala arrived with flashing lights and murmuring elites. Maya wore a tailored black suit, simple, sharp, entirely her. No dramatic transformation. No attempt to compete. And somehow that made her stand out. Whispers followed them, not mocking but curious. Inside the grand ballroom, Maya handled schedules, redirected misplaced guests, and quietly solved problems before they escalated. She wasn't decoration. She was indispensable. At one point the crowd pressed too tightly around them. Cameras flashed rapidly. Maya stiffened. Without thinking, Ethan placed a steady hand at the small of her back, guiding her through the chaos. The gesture was protective, not possessive. Later, on the balcony overlooking the city, she exhaled slowly. "You didn't treat me like a prop," she said. "I wouldn't," he replied. For the first time, the partnership between them didn't feel like employer and employee. It felt balanced. And balance was something Ethan had never known he was missing. Success had always been Ethan Caldwell's shield. When business rivals attacked, he acquired them. When headlines criticized him, he outperformed them. Control was his language and detachment was his armor. But betrayal feels different when it comes from inside your own circle. The week after the gala, Ethan discovered that a trusted executive had leaked confidential information to a competitor. The damage wasn't irreversible, but it was personal. He returned home later than usual, the mansion quiet and dim. Maya noticed immediately. He wasn't pacing with his usual restless energy. He wasn't on his phone issuing clipped instructions. He was sitting alone in the darkened living room, tie loosened, staring at nothing. She didn't ask questions. Instead, she walked in, switched on a single lamp, and sat on the opposite end of the couch. Silence stretched between them, not tense but heavy. They think I don't notice, he said finally. They think I'm too distracted. Maya folded her hands calmly. Are you? He let out a humorless breath. Maybe I've built a life where no one knows who I really am. Makes it easy to underestimate me. She studied him, not the billionaire, not the headline, but the man who looked unexpectedly tired. You don't have to prove yourself every second, she said quietly. Something in her tone, steady, certain, broke through his defenses. Without overthinking, Ethan shifted closer. There was hesitation in the movement, a silent question. Maya answered it by opening her arms. He leaned into her embrace. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't passionate. It was grounding. For the first time in years, Ethan wasn't being admired or challenged. He was simply being held. And in that quiet living room, the walls he had spent a lifetime building began to crack. The discovery happened by accident. Maya had been organizing documents in the home office when a familiar name caught her attention on a foundation report. Daniel Brooks. Her breath stilled. She read the page twice to be certain. The Caldwell Foundation's Engineering Excellence Grant, full tuition coverage, housing allowance, research funding. Sponsor Ethan Caldwell. Her mind raced. Daniel had mentioned a private donor, but he never knew the identity behind the scholarship. Neither had she. Until now. That evening she waited for Ethan in the study, the report clutched tightly in her hand. You funded my brother's education, she said without preamble when he entered. Ethan looked at the paper, then at her. The foundation funds hundreds of students. But you approve final selections. His silence confirmed enough. Anger flared, not because of the help but because of what it implied. Did you hire me because you knew, she demanded? Because you felt responsible? His brows drew together. I didn't know Daniel Brooks was your brother. She searched his face for deception and found none. I review profiles for merit, he continued firmly. Your brother earned that scholarship. It has nothing to do with you. Her pride wrestled with relief. I don't need charity, she said, voice tight. And I don't offer it, he replied. I invest in potential. The tension between them shifted, less accusatory, more vulnerable. You think I'd hire you out of pity? He asked quietly. She didn't answer. Because the truth frightened her more than the misunderstanding. If he hadn't hired her out of obligation, then everything between them had grown naturally. And that meant the connection wasn't accidental. It was real. And real was far more terrifying. Scandals had never shaken Ethan Caldwell before. They usually entertained him. But this one was different. By morning, headlines spread across every major outlet. Anonymous sources claiming that Maya Brooks had strategically worked her way into his life. That she was using sympathy and proximity to secure wealth. That the Tomboy Maid had calculated every step. Clara Whitmore's name was never mentioned. It didn't need to be. Maya stood in the kitchen reading the news on her phone, her expression unreadable. She had endured judgment her entire life, about her clothes, her bluntness, her refusal to conform. But this was bigger. This threatened Daniel's reputation. Her dignity. Ethan entered moments later, fury restrained behind controlled silence. You don't have to say anything, she said before he could speak. Distance yourself. Protect your company. He stared at her. Is that what you think I'll do? It's the smart move. I've made smart moves my whole life, he replied evenly. They've never mattered more than this. By afternoon, a press conference was arranged. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Ethan stepped to the podium alone. The rumors circulating about Maya Brooks are false, he said calmly. She is one of the most honest, hardworking people I know. Any attempt to undermine her integrity is an attack on mine. The room quieted. I will not distance myself from someone simply because it's convenient. No dramatics. No anger. Just certainty. When he returned home, Maya stood waiting in the foyer. You didn't have to do that, she said softly. Yes, he answered, meeting her eyes. I did. For the first time, Ethan hadn't chosen power. He had chosen her. And in doing so, the Playboy billionaire who once chased attention had finally learned what it meant to stand still, for someone who mattered. The morning sun streamed through the mansion's windows, painting golden streaks across the polished floors. Maya stood by the balcony, arms folded, her mind racing. She had drafted her resignation letter the night before. This can't last, she whispered to herself. Our worlds are too different. Ethan appeared behind her, his presence calm yet commanding. I heard about the letter, he said quietly. Maya turned, unsure what to say. She had rehearsed 1,000 ways to explain it. I think it's better if I leave. He stepped closer, closing the space between them. Better for whom? She swallowed. For both of us. You're a billionaire. Me. Ethan shook his head, a faint smile tugging at his lips. You don't get it, do you? I don't need someone impressed by my wealth or status. I need someone who challenges me, someone real. Her eyes widened slightly. He wasn't boasting. He wasn't charming her with a playful line. He was confessing. Vulnerable. Honest. And that's me? She asked softly. Yes, he admitted. You didn't tame me by force. You didn't charm me. You simply refused to fall for the mask I wear. And now, I can't imagine my life without that. Maya felt a warmth bloom inside her chest. Pride, fear, love, all intertwined. Slowly she stepped forward. I love the man you're becoming, she said, voice steady. He smiled, the kind of smile that made everything in the world feel right. They embraced, not hurried, not dramatic, just steady and true. For the first time, Ethan wasn't chasing someone to fill a void. He was choosing. And Maya wasn't submitting to a world she didn't belong to. She was choosing him too. They stood together on the balcony, arms wrapped around each other, watching the city awaken below. Sometimes love isn't a grand gesture. Sometimes it's simply standing beside someone and deciding to stay. Stay tuned for the final chapter to see how their story blossoms forever. And don't forget to subscribe for the next part. Months had passed since the gala, the rumors, and the confrontations. The mansion was no longer just a home for Ethan Caldwell. It had become a space of balance, laughter, and unexpected warmth. Maya no longer wore the uniform of a maid. Instead, she managed community initiatives under Ethan's foundation, her practicality and grounded nature transforming the projects into something meaningful. She moved through the offices and project sites with confidence, respected for her skills rather than judged by her background. Ethan watched her often, not out of obsession but out of admiration. She had reshaped the energy of his life. Where once he had sought to control everything, he now learned to let her influence guide him. The billionaire who once chased headlines had found value in quiet, genuine connection. On one crisp evening, they stood together on the balcony overlooking the city skyline. The lights below twinkled like scattered stars, but neither of them spoke. Words weren't necessary. Ethan wrapped his arms around Maya, and she leaned into him, their foreheads touching briefly. This, Ethan said softly, feels better than anything I've ever built. Maya smiled, resting her head on his chest. Because it's real. And because we chose it together. Mrs. Caldwell had softened, even complimenting Maya's influence over Ethan's demeanor. Daniel continued excelling in his studies, oblivious to the quiet guidance of his sister's employer-turned-partner. Life had found its rhythm. Ethan no longer sought to have any woman, nor did he wish to impress the world. He had learned that true power wasn't in wealth, influence, or conquest. It was in trust, partnership, and respect. Maya had not just tamed the Playboy billionaire. She had reshaped him into a man capable of love, patience, and devotion. And together they were unstoppable, not because of what they owned but because of the life they had chosen to build side by side.